More people were arrested in L.A. after the Lakers won the 2020 NBA title than were arrested in L.A. on Sunday during the protests, during the ICE riot, during the Gestapo invasion of Southern California. This is not some sort of metaphor or analogy. October 11th, 2020, after the COVID-delayed NBA Finals ended with the LA Lakers winning the championship in LA, there were 76 arrests. Sunday, the day Trump now says that without him and his brown shirts, Los Angeles would have been completely obliterated, there were 42 arrests. 76 to 42. Vandalism, unlawful assembly, failure to disperse, bottles thrown at cops, vehicles set on fire, flashbangs and projectiles fired at civilians, graffiti covering buildings, property damage, a crowd of at least 2,000 out of control, downtown L.A. streets closed. No, that was also all after the Lakers won. The Lakers' victory celebration 5 years ago was measurably a greater risk to security and safety than were the protests against Trump's unconstitutional kidnapping of civilians, often citizens, almost always law-abiding, this past Sunday. And if that raw final score is not stark enough, Lakers 76, protests for due process 42, it's a final. You knew this was true once Trump declared victory yesterday. At midnight, our Hitler was posting, looking really bad in L.A., bring in the troops. At noon, our Hitler was posting that the governor and the mayor, who, just to clarify things, are not insane fascist dictators, quote, should be saying, thank you, President Trump. You are so wonderful. We would be nothing without you. Sir. Is he an insane narcissist or a calculating monster? Why can't we have both? Right after congratulating himself, Trump mobilized 500 members of the Marines to join the National Guard in L.A. Some say it's 700 members of the Marines to take care of the rapidly expanding nothing. It is not just unnecessary, it is illegal. And I will get to the California lawsuit against all of it presently, which has now been filed. The other confirmation, though, that Sunday was nothing, 76 Laker arrests, 42 Trump riot arrests, was when Trump insisted, quote, I wouldn't call it quite an insurrection, but it could have led to an insurrection, unquote. And there was disappointment in his voice because, of course, he wants one. As we will analyze in a moment, the powers he has awarded himself when federalizing the National Guard turn out to be enough for him to literally install his dictatorship today. But let's first finish the cleanup on the near-complete obliteration of Los Angeles. Ah, what a shame. I like the place. This could reignite at any point. You could know more about this than I do because I recorded this earlier than you're listening to it. The rumor within local government was ICE would be kidnapping people off the streets of L.A. and Southern California for the next 28 days to a month. They were at multiple Home Depots yesterday. And, of course, Trump wants it reignited because that is the point of it. The deportations are not only an end in themselves, raw meat to the racists and the Stephen Miller-grade psychos, but they are also a means for him to control anything he wants, especially, foremost, the midterm elections. But that there was nothing approaching what he told his cult had happened was underscored when Rick Caruso, the lifelong Republican who lost the election for mayor to Karen Bass in November 2022 and has since criticized her every move, when he wrote, quote, there is no emergency, widespread threat, or out-of-control violence in Los Angeles, and absolutely no danger that justifies deployment of the National Guard, military, or other federal force to the streets of this or any other Southern California city. Local law enforcement is capable of handling the situation and should arrest anyone causing violence in the streets. We must call for calm in the streets, and deployment of the National Guard may prompt just the opposite. Lifelong Republican. Lost the mayor's race. Hates the mayor. Caruso reiterated all of that yesterday, just in case you missed it, live in drive time on local radio news just before noon Eastern. For the record, Caruso was the Republican head of the police commission in L.A. for many years, and he has a little money behind him. That race for mayor, he blew $41 million on the primary. Around the country, as much as Trump is selling the idea that L.A. is a cauldron and he alone can save it, even though, no, that's right. I saved it yesterday, so everybody should call me sir. It's not landing. Polling by the last king of 538, Elliot Morris, confirms Trump has been hurt by the deportations and especially the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia and people like him. And the Democrats have been helped. Not that they're doing anything with it, except for Newsom. New CBS polling says 55% in this country support the general idea of these deportations, but 56% dislike how Trump is doing it. And no matter how they feel about the kidnappings and the renditions, 63% want due process. The problem, of course, is that Trump doesn't have to convince anybody but his supporters and the news media and the Republican political whores he terrorizes into submission. He doesn't need 51% of voters. He doesn't need 51% of Americans. He just needs 100% of his voters. They are, in short, a mob, a gang, an organized crime family, a cult, a suicide cult. Trump stumbling up those airplane steps Sunday is the perfect metaphor. You and I correctly see a deranged, delusional, elderly creature rapidly losing control, not just of his mind, but of his bloated carcass. They see him triumphantly getting up the stairs anyway and overcoming all the obstacles anyway and saving Los Angeles from a crisis that he completely provoked and escalated. And, matter of fact, the son of a bitch didn't even manage to create a real crisis, did he? I need a couple of moments of humorous relief. One North Carolina congressman, a Republican named Moore, who does not appear to have his own neck, let alone a brain, retweeted a Homeland Security post insisting California politicians must call off their rioting mob. Moore added, L.A. is being burned down by lawless mobs who support foreign criminals. The photo from DHS that he has retweeted shows one car on fire. One. Not even very on fire. There's some smoke. There's about a dozen people around this car. One is standing on top of it. He is shirtless. He is wearing a Mexican flag because, of course, you never see a Mexican flag in Los Angeles. It's the apocalypse. Again, LAKERS arrests, 76. Trump ICE riot arrests, 42. A final score. Then there is the foppish, conservative grifter Scott Presler. You know, the guy with the shoulder-length hair. The one Politico reported had sex in an office shared by the Republican National Committee and the Republican Party of Virginia while he was working for the latter group and took pictures of himself having sex in the office and posted the pictures on Craigslist. Political outreach, I suppose. Well, Trumpists, Mr. Presler is ready to meet you at the barricades. Quote, if ICE needs more bodies on the ground, I'm willing to temporarily stop my political work to help. I studied criminal justice in college, am physically fit, and want to make sure that the mission is a success. I'm very serious, ready and willing to serve. Oh, Scott will save you. He has a degree from George Mason University. Now about the real danger behind this danger. Governor Gavin Newsom has filed, the Attorney General has filed, a federal lawsuit by the state of California against the Department of Defense and Warrior Ethos and Hair Products devotee Pete Hegseth for violating the state's rights in the 10th Amendment, specifically the provisos that state control of the National Guard is in the hands of the states. Or as somebody else put it in 2020, quote, we have laws, we have to go by the laws, we can't move in the National Guard, we can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor, unquote. And you know who said that? Then President Dementia Trump. As straightforward as this would seem, especially with Trump providing this unintentional testimony against himself, there is a darker element to this, as outlined yesterday by the impeccable Ryan Goodman, the co-editor-in-chief of Just Security and CNN analyst. Mr. Goodman notes what most of us had not had time to see because of the spectacle of Trump's terrorist attack against L.A. The memorandum from Saturday, which federalizes the National Guard, is almost unbelievably, almost completely vague. I encourage you to read Ryan Goodman's thread on Blue Sky. It is harrowing and detailed. These are the 8 bullet points, and unfortunately that term may never have been more appropriate than now. Points 1 and 2, the definition of rebellion, which used to mean, at least January 6th. Rebellion now means peaceful protests. The part of the combined Pentagon and Homeland Security memo Goodman highlighted reads, to the extent that protests or acts of violence directly inhibit the execution of the laws, they constitute a form of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. So if you protest, the National Guard is in theory entitled to shoot you. The second point he makes is that one use of that word or, to the extent that protests or acts of violence. So they're both covered. If you protest or you commit an act of violence, they can shoot you. Goodman's third and fourth points. This memo authorizes the use of preemptive force and the use of preemptive force for, quote, protests. I hereby call into federal service members and units of the National Guard under 10 U.S.C. 12406 to temporarily protect ICE and other United States government personnel who are performing federal functions, including the enforcement of federal law, and to protect federal property at locations where protests against these functions are occurring or are likely to occur based on current threat assessments and planned operations. Your nonviolent protest doesn't even have to have happened yet. They can bring in the National Guard. Goodman's fifth point, no geographic limit. This is not an authorization to use the Guard in Southern California in June of 2025. It's all-purpose. It's a magic evil wand. Of all people, Bill Kristol noted this first. To quote him, the presidential memorandum never mentions Los Angeles or California. It's a blank check for mobilizing National Guard and active duty troops to deploy anywhere to protect federal personnel or functions wherever protests are occurring or are likely to occur. It gets worse and worse. Goodman's sixth point authorizes regular armed forces. It does not tell you under what authority. A president can use the military in an emergency. That is established, but he has to invoke the Insurrection Act first, except this memo does not say that. It just says members of the regular armed forces as determined appropriate in his discretion. So much for the Insurrection Act. So much for any review of what a president does. Goodman's seventh point, it expressly overrides the governor's authorities. Changing Title 10, Section 12406 from orders for these purposes shall be issued through the governors of the states to saying only that the Secretary of Defense should, quote, coordinate with the governors of the states. For the record, before we finish these points, this whole thing is, or at least should be, incredibly illegal. But amazingly, Trump has already violated it, his own new illegal rules. According to Governor Newsom, he not only ignored the governor's rights regarding the National Guard, he didn't even bother with that lip service instruction to coordinate with the governor. Lastly, Ryan Goodman's eighth point, not a last resort. The Department of Justice has a policy which is at least as old as the policy that you can't indict a candidate around election time, that the military can only be deployed legally in this country as a last resort. This whole thing quite clearly. And you don't need to be Ryan Goodman to realize this, and you don't need to read the entire memo from Homeland Security and the Pentagon to realize this. This whole thing authorizes the use of the military as a first resort. This is why Gavin Newsom in California are suing. This is why ultimately that lawsuit may be more important than anything that happens on the streets of Los Angeles this entire month. This is why Newsom is suing. It is not just about what Trump is doing in L.A., and it won't be resolved fast enough to likely impact what Trump is doing in L.A. It is that it provides a template for Trump to institute a police state, a military dictatorship in this country today. You can use the National Guard and the military against peaceful protests or just the threat of peaceful protests or your threat assessment that there may be peaceful protests. Or you can use it against anything, really. Or, as we are seeing in L.A., you can use it against nothing. CNN should have Mr. Goodman on to cover this 24/7. Instead, it will show you an empty intersection in downtown L.A. and insist hell may break loose at any moment. Right after this message from yet another insurance firm specializing in mesothelioma. Which leads me to one dark bit of humor. I am glad CNN televised George Clooney's Good Night and Good Luck over the weekend, which I mentioned. I saw the first night of previews. I hope they rerun the live presentation again. It has many flaws, not the least of one is fairly hilarious. George Clooney is not, as an actor, as good a newscaster as his father Nick Clooney was, largely because Nick Clooney was a newscaster in Los Angeles when I was a sportscaster there. It has flaws, but it is invaluable right now. Except I couldn't help notice that CNN ran it Saturday night just as the events in L.A. were beginning to snowball, and CNN kept with it, kept showing it and a post-game show for 3 hours anyway. In short, CNN was showing a play about news instead of showing, news. Which, sadly, is the CNN story in a nutshell. Next, now to Musk and Trump and why, follow me closely here, why I think their fight probably proves no, Musk did not rig the voting machines last November. That's next. This is Countdown. Now, two things that may have slipped off your plate in the last 10 days of constant chaos. Okay, last 10 years of constant chaos. They are beginning to talk about a military draft again. Bluntly, nothing. Not even the blue state tax strike I mentioned yesterday could bring Trump down faster than if he imposed a draft on the families of American youth in the 21st century. Sean Hannity, one of the oldest and most obvious distributors of Trump's trial balloons, said on his radio show last week, quote, "Look, Israel's safety today depends on the brave men and women of the IDF." Well, that's also bullshit, but we'll pass on that for the moment. Every citizen, by the way, is required to serve. I actually think we should adopt this in this country. It'd be so good for our young people. Required to serve. That means a draft, or it means compulsory registration and service, which is a draft where everybody is drafted and sent to L.A. to rendition the brown people. We should adopt this in this country. You first, Sean. See if we can find a military suit, a paratrooper's outfit that would fit you. Trump hinted at this during the campaign. Last June, his former Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller, told the Washington Post that a national service requirement should be, quote, strongly considered. He described the concept as a common rite of passage, one that would create a sense of, quote, shared sacrifice among America's youth, unquote. A little article, not much play, and it went over so badly Trump had to publicly deny it, to say he'd never even thought about a draft, never, not once. Just as I'm certain he's not thinking about it now. I'm certain Sean Hannity, the Renfield to Trump's Dracula, the man who has not had an original idea since 1996. I'm sure Sean Hannity dreamed that up all on his own, and he wasn't told to say it by his master. And the second news story that you may have missed, Musk and Trump. Remember Elon Musk? Remember when it was not just the lead story, but the only story? Are you old enough to? I mean, it was, checks calendar, 3,000 years ago. Oh, no, sorry, I read that wrong. It was last Friday. And one, yes, it's a distraction. Certainly by now it is a distraction. But two, I think it's a meaningful distraction. And three, to understand its meaning, you really have to turn off your sanity and your filters for a moment and infer what crazy people do in such circumstances. And also, four, I told you so. If you miss this or have forgotten it, because after all, there's only so much space in our brains for the latest asshole thing Trump has done, overnight Friday, Musk deleted his Trump is in the Epstein files tweets and the Trump should be immediately impeached tweets. But Musk did not delete his I won the election for Trump tweets. Now, again, it's trivia. That's why it's at the back end of the segment here, and it could wait till Tuesday. But the tea leaves, I think, are important. When this erupted, Musk went almost immediately to Epstein and impeachment and President Vance. And I suppose it's possible Elon was hit by lightning over the weekend and suddenly his head cleared and he removed those tweets because he wanted to de-escalate like a, human being would. But Musk and Trump aren't human beings in the sense the rest of us understand the term. They don't de-escalate. In an emergency, they may occasionally run away in fear, but they can't be strategic or remorseful or corrective, even in self-interest. And screenshots be damned, they just try to burn the evidence and hope nobody notices. And since the mottos of the Republican Party and the Association of MAGA Disease Victims have long since become, I haven't seen what he posted, said, wrote on the sidewalk in his own blood, so I can't comment on it. Burning the evidence usually works. What I notice is that he did not delete, quote, without me, Trump would have lost the election. Dems would control the House, and Republicans would be 51-49 in the Senate. And adopting for a moment the crazy think that prevails in the vast empty caverns of Musk's mind, I would suggest this confirms Musk did not rig the voting for Trump, and that Trump's infamous remark about Musk knowing those vote-counting computers was just more of Trump's imbecilic imprecision. Now, look, I don't diminish or demean anybody who thinks otherwise. I don't doubt that people could listen to that and think Trump just confessed that Musk rigged the election. To you and me, vote-counting computers, that means elections. And Diebold company machines, switching votes in Florida in 2000 from Gore to Bush. But to Trump, who is more like a semi-sentient vegetable of some kind, vote-counting computers could mean anything. Anything from that, actual election rigging, to computers that produce polling results to tell Trump how many votes he's going to get. It could mean that or the other thing. It could mean Siri. Trump used the word counting, and sometimes to Trump counting means counting out loud. It doesn't say the out loud part, it just says counting. And we're supposed to assume we know what he means. We're supposed to assume he knows what he means. That's the way Trump is. His relationship to language, to human language, is like that of Chance the Gardener from Being There. Trump only uses words that could mean 10 different things. In any event, the reason I think all this Sturm und Drang with the two worst people in this country actually confirms there was no Musk effort to fix the 2024 election is that when things with Trump got so bad that Musk was willing to invoke Epstein, not only accused Trump of pedophilia or knowledge of pedophilia, but of using his government to cover up evidence of pedophilia, when things with Trump got so bad so fast that Musk went to impeachment faster than I do, Musk did not say, I rigged the election for him. His post, which is still up, is about the things we know about. Immoral, unforgivable, but largely legal things. $275 million in funding. Putting onto the campaign trail is not inconsiderable appeal as a stupid person's idea of a smart person. Throwing his social media site completely behind Trump. Because if you are willing to imply to idiots who believe all liberals are part of a cannibalistic pedophilia ring that their hero, the sitting president of the United States and semi-Jesus, is in a report about a pedophilia ring, and that's why he hasn't released it to you the way he promised, and if you're willing to say flat out he should be immediately impeached, what on God's green earth would stop you from saying, by the way, I rigged the election for him? To Trump's supporters, the idea that you rigged the election for him is like 17th on the list of great admissions. Oh, you did? Tell us how so we can do it without you next time. I mean, nuclear war is nuclear war. You don't hold anything back. And Musk didn't hold anything back. He may have rolled some of it back over the weekend, but the claim he won the election for Trump is still out there. And the only reason I can think of for why what he wrote is not stronger than it is that what he did was not stronger than it was. Musk, Thursday, was reaching for things with which to kill Trump, at least metaphorically. Epstein, impeachment, and then he suddenly said, oh, rigging the election? I won't throw that at him. Nonsense. Also, if Musk or anybody else actually rigged all or part of the 2024 election, why didn't he rig the Wisconsin Supreme Court election 2 months ago? I mean, he spent $20 million on it. He went there, humiliated himself, campaigned in his ketamine apocalypse way, and his guy Brad lost by 10%. It's a lot. But 10% in a statewide special election is less than 239,000 votes. And Musk would have literally had to flip only 120,000 votes, and Brad wins. And if you can't do that, how can you rig several swing states in an actual presidential election? And by the way, one of them you would have had to have rigged would have been Wisconsin. The Musk vote rigging machine broke, did it, between November and April? Couldn't get the Wi-Fi? Starlink failed you, Elon? You got a blue screen on your Dell? So there is the rather serpentine, backwards logic that says to me the Musk-Trump fight kind of proves the election wasn't rigged. Because given what Musk wanted to do to Trump last week, if he had that rock, he would have dropped it on Trump like Trump was Wile E. Coyote. Which brings me to my last point about this. I did tell you so. When the podcast promos dropped last Wednesday night, Musk attacks Trump. There was blowback from every corner. No, he didn't. No, you're making too much of one retweet. No, I got that one right. I am not an insider. I do not have sources. Even on TV, I really didn't have sources. They all looked at me funny in Washington like, how does this guy know stuff? But what I might lack in those, and even lack in insight at times, I make up for in old age. Trump as the coyote and Musk as the roadrunner. Okay, Trump as the coyote and Musk as a different coyote might be new, but the formula ain't. These are narcissists with brains that don't work right. I have covered them half of my career, and I have worked for them half of my life. And oh, by the way, there will be another round to this fight, at least another round. Trump drifting off from reality like, A metallic balloon let go by a child in Southern California, callback to the last episode, has threatened Musk with more King Lear consequences if now he helps Democrats instead. How will Musk respond? Who knows? Other than that, he will respond. These are madmen with bases who cannot conceive that their cult leader is wrong. They will fight. As I suggested online, we can only hope that when they fight, it's a duel. Which brings me to the chef's kiss here. The Washington Post buried this in its thumbsucker on the Musk-Trump brawl. It got a little play on Sunday because it's such a dramatic image. They didn't deny it at the White House. But literally, the Washington Post put this in paragraph 22, long past the point Bezos or his whores would have fallen asleep and thus missed it. It was about a sub-fight between Musk and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who I am still not convinced actually exists, who I am still not convinced isn't just a character played by the impeccable actor Barry Bostwick, who used to portray the mayor on Spin City. The term fight here is used literally, quoting the Post, quoting Steve Bannon. And yes, we will accept Steve Bannon as a source for anything this much fun. Quote, in mid-April, Musk and Bessent had gone into the Oval Office to make their respective cases about their preferences for acting IRS commissioner. Trump decided to support Bessent's choice. That disagreement was first reported by the New York Times. After Bessent and Musk exited the Oval Office and began walking down the hallway, the two men started to exchange insults, Bannon said, adding that Bessent brought up Musk's claims that he would uncover more than $1 trillion in wasteful and fraudulent government spending, which Musk had not succeeded at doing. Quote, Scott said, you're a fraud, you're a total fraud, Bannon said in an interview. Musk then rammed his shoulder into Bessent's rib cage, quote, like a rugby player, Bannon said, and Bessent hit him back. Multiple people stepped in to break up the scrum, rugby term, as the two men reached the National Security Advisor's office and Musk was shuffled out of the White House. So we are now at this point in this bizarre timeline. The Treasury Secretary is physically attacked by the mad scientist spacey guy outside the National Security Advisor's office. Thus, the movie Dr. Strangelove is real. Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. Finally, the number one story on the countdown and my favorite topic, me and things from my career and my life. And it is to me amazing, even after all this time, that you could meet somebody just once in your life, but years later be moved to tears upon learning of their death. Then again, the man in question was named Walter Matthau. And if he was not the most popular American comedic actor of the last half of the 20th century, he was close to it. And maybe more importantly, he was the most skilled minimal touch American actor of the last half of the 20th century. In other words, he was the man who on stage or on camera seemed to be doing the least amount of actual acting while still keeping you utterly convinced that the guy you saw on the screen was not Walter Matthau, but was Oscar Madison, and was not Walter Matthau, but was Max Goldman, and was not Walter Matthau, but was Willie Gingrich, and was not Walter Matthau, but was Mel Miller. Even though Mel Miller had a southern accent, smoked a pipe, had horn-rimmed glasses, and supposedly went to Vanderbilt. We all knew Walter Matthau. It felt like we knew him personally because he managed a miracle every time he performed. It was all him up there, and yet, at the same time, it was not him at all. Anyway, October 1st was his birthday, which is what brought this extraordinary man to the front of my mind again. I will get to my meeting with him. First, Walter Matthau's best friends as an adult were his partner in half a dozen films, Jack Lemmon, and my dear friend Norman Lloyd, the one-man history of Hollywood who we lost in 2021 at the age of 106. Norman loved Walter, and Norman loved talking about Walter, and there was an amazing amount of things to talk about Walter. Norman told me that on the last of the Grumpy Old Men movies that he and Lemmon made together, I think it was called Grumpy Old Men Were Doing This for the Money, Matthau wanted to wrap up one day of shooting quickly. He was scheduled to film a scene in a water slide made up to look like a sewer through which his character was escaping. As the lunch break was called, he said to Lemon, "Come on, Jack, let's go rehearse the water slide thing. This way we can do it in one take. Get the hell out of here. Anyway, don't you have to wait an hour after eating before you can shoot through a sewer?" They went to the sewer water slide set. Walter Matthau grabbed the raft he was supposed to ride, and he jumped in. As he went through it, he studied all the corners and where the cameras would be so he knew where to make his faces. And seconds later, he was shooting out the far end of the water slide onto the giant inflatable 12-foot square air mattress placed there to break his fall. Or he would have been doing that, except it was lunch, and the Teamsters had deflated the mattress, then moved it away because the set was on lunch break. So Walter Matthau, then 73 years old, came flying out of the water slide onto the pavement. He broke his collarbone, which is just about as painful a thing as you can break. "No!" Walter Matthau screamed. Jack Lemmon raced over to him. Walter, are you all right?" "No, I'm not, Jack. Call 911. Ow! Ow!" Lemon panicked. "Can I help you, Walter? Can I get you something, Walter?" "Yes, Jack, get me 911. Ow! Ow!" Lemon continued to panic. But till they come, are you okay? Walter, are you comfortable?" Walter Matthau was in sheer agony, but he realized through the fog of pain that one of the oldest jokes in show business was actually happening to him, finally, in real life. "Am I comfortable? I make a nice living, Jack. Ow! Ow!" My friend Norman Lloyd used to go hiking with Walter Matthau in the Hollywood Hills, and he told me that one day Walter was unusually quiet. The two had gone a mile or so when Matthau suddenly stopped and grabbed Norman by the arm. "Normie, did you know at the end Beethoven was so deaf he thought he was painting?" Norman smiled, snorted, and started to say that it was the dumbest thing he'd ever heard, but halfway through Norman's sentence, Matthau had already turned away from him and was back walking again. Another mile passed in silence, and now Matthau slowed down and faced his friend. "Normie, this is important. I have something to tell you." Norman said his heart skipped. He thought there was something wrong. "What is it, Walter?" "Did you know at the end Beethoven was so deaf he thought he was painting?" Now Norman just shook his head. As they completed their 5-mile hike through the hills, Matthau stopped roughly once every mile and repeated the same line. "Did you know at the end Beethoven was so deaf he thought he was painting?" Norman told me it totally unnerved me. When we got back to where we parked our cars, I felt like I had to avenge myself somehow, so I blurted out to him, "Walter, did you know at the end Beethoven was so deaf he thought he was painting?" Norman said Matthau looked at him, screwing his great craggy face into a resentful sneer as he did. "What the hell are you talking about? Thought he was painting. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard." As I said, I met Walter Matthau once. When I was a local sportscaster in Los Angeles, I was invited to host a charity event at the Hollywood Park racetrack. I ordinarily did not do these things because to do them, I would have to take the day off. But when the organizers said, "Oh, and Walter Matthau will be there," I just asked for directions. First time I had ever imagined what it was like to be a sports writer or to be a sports broadcaster, it was when I was 9 years old and I saw Walter Matthau portray Oscar Madison in the movie The Odd Couple. It was exactly what I wanted to be and where I wanted to live and how I wanted to eat. And I wanted to get a chance to tell him that. So at the charity dinner, I screwed up my courage. I introduced myself. I told him all that, and he replied, "I hate you." I was so crushed, I almost passed out. And clearly, Walter Matthau recognized this. No, I don't hate your work. I watch you every night on Channel 2 Action News, you and Jim Lampley and Bree Lampley and Jim Lampley. But I hate the fact that you don't have an accent of any kind. Where are you raised? Iowa? I did not know where this conversation was going. I said I was from the Bronx originally. Is that right? I'm from Brooklyn? Could you tell? The hell kind of speech teacher did you have, yet you sound like Iowa? I explained my father had said that if I wanted to go into broadcasting, I could not talk, quote, like the rest of us. Walter looked away from me and then back, and he said, "Very wise words. Your father was a speech teacher?" "No," I said, "architect." His eyes flared. "How in the hell does that work?" I started to explain when it suddenly dawned on me that we were discussing this only because he said he hated the fact that I did not have an accent. I asked him why. No accent means I can't do an impression of you. Well, this caused me to pause. Impressions? This is 1991. In 1991, Walter Matthau was one of the top 5 most impersonated voices in America. Anybody who did impressions, good or bad, professional or amateur, anybody did a Walter Matthau. You did your Sammy Davis, your Howard Cosell, your Walter Matthau. Wait, I said to him, you do impressions of sportscasters? Yes, he said proudly. Would you like to hear them? I said, I'll pay cash. Don't normally do these, but seeing you are in the business, I will. Just for you. I practice these a lot, by the way. 20 years later, Norman Lloyd confirmed for me Matthau did do sportscaster impressions. He did practice them a lot. This was not some sort of bit. Now, back in 1991, Matthau cleared his throat. He shook his shoulders. Let's start with the best. And it sounds something like this. Hello, everybody. This is Vin Scully at Dodger Stadium. What do you think? It sounded exactly like Walter Matthau. Didn't sound like Vin Scully. It didn't even sound like a bad impression of Vin Scully. It didn't even sound like a bad impression of Walter Matthau. It was just Walter Matthau talking. Thinking quickly, I said, uncanny, Mr. Matthau. Thank you. I work on Vinny especially hard. He's my favorite. Now the big mouth. Hello again. This is Howard Cosell at ringside. How about that one? I think I got most of the inflection. Goodness, Mr. Matthau, it's like he's in the room with us. This went on for many minutes. Kurt Gowdy, Chick Hearn, Al Michaels, several local LA radio announcers. I cursed myself for not having brought a tape recorder with me. Walter Matthau did impressions of sportscasters, and they were all terrible. But he said he couldn't do one of me because I had no accent. I was complimented and crushed. After a very nice event saluting his friend and neighbor in the front row seats at the Laker games, Dr. Robert Kurlan, we called it an evening, and as everybody got up to leave, I asked Walter Matthau to autograph my program from the dinner. My pleasure, he said. Nice work tonight, but I still don't get how your father, the architect, was also a speech teacher, but never mind. In the program, he wrote this. Listen, Keith, quit kidding around. No, don't. Walter Matthau. It was lovely. And then he did something that took my breath away, something I have tried to do anytime circumstances permitted me to. He picked up his program, he handed it to me, and he said, now, you sign mine. Can you believe that? I only met him the one time, but that gesture stayed with me to such a degree that this happened. 9 years later, I woke up at the crack of dawn to go host the baseball game of the week at Fox Studios in L.A. It was Saturday morning, July 1st, 2000. It was 9 years and about 2 weeks after I met Walter Matthau. And on the all-news radio station, there was one big story that morning in Los Angeles. Overnight, the great actor Walter Matthau had died, heart attack, aged 79. I burst into tears. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Most of our countdown music was arranged, produced, and performed by Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, our musical directors of Countdown. This is my all-purpose Walter Matthau, Bernie Sanders voice. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. I'll stop now. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc., is our sports music. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. That's Countdown for today, day 142 of America Held Hostage. Just 1,322 days until the scheduled end of his lame duck and lame-brained term, unless Putin or Musk remove him sooner, or the actuarial tables do, or we do. The next scheduled countdown is Thursday. Until that next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, and what was the last part of that? All right, good luck.